The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
We are now about to witness the truth.
it's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Wednesday. What's the day? It's Wednesday, March 22nd, 2016. Thanks so much for joining us. This is totally on me right here. I've got something going on in my background. I got to find it. Because it's annoying me. But while I find it, let me go ahead and thank our patrons, all of our supporters, without whom this is not possible. All of our latest, everyone, everything that you do from liking to subscribing to sharing the content, we cannot do it without you. And for that, I want to thank you. I think we'll be fine. I think we're good to go. All right. So we're back. Thanks so much to my homegirl, Anoa for covering for me last night. As always, she's clutch. Like, she can always come. She always has my back. So special thanks to Anoa. I was literally the only person healthy in my house for the last week. And last night was like the climax, was the season finale of the flu season. So I couldn't break away from the urgent care to be with you guys last night, but I know Anoa did a great job. So special thanks to her for all that she does. All right, let's jump in and cover a couple of things that are happening in the news. So there was an attack, as far as we know, they're considering it a terrorist attack in London, but we haven't yet found out exactly the perpetrator behind it, at least as of this recording. I'm sure if you are watching it live, rather, if you're watching this tomorrow morning, the news could have changed. But as we speak right now, we do not know who is responsible for killing 5 people and injuring 40 people using a vehicle and then a subsequent knife attack near British Parliament, according to the Washington Post. So the suspect plowed a SUV through pedestrians on Westminster Bridge, and then he fatally stabbed a police officer at the gates of London's Parliament. The attacker himself was shot and killed by the police, but the total attack left 5 people dead, including the assailant. 40 people were injured with the vehicle as he plowed through. British Prime Minister Theresa May said, quote, "The location of this attack was no accident. The terrorists chose to strike at the heart of our capital city, where people of all nationalities, religions, and cultures come together to celebrate the values of liberty, democracy, and the freedom of speech." And she went on to say, quote, "Any attempt to defeat those values through violence and terror is doomed to failure." And she said, "Tomorrow morning, Parliament will meet as normal." What's interesting about this tragedy is, well, actually 2 things. One, it is actually 1 year to the date after the terrorist attack in Brussels, Brussels, Belgium, which killed 40 people. And it seems almost too coincidental. But we don't know who perpetrated this. But as per usual, people are quick to politicize it without even knowing who it actually was. The New York Post actually put out a couple of tweets, and we'll put them on your screen, accusing, here it is, you see it on your screen. The New York Post earlier today said, "Breaking: the terrorist behind the London rampage was identified as Abu Zadin, a radical Muslim cleric." This couldn't really possibly be the case because Abu is I'm sorry, his last name. He's actually in prison, according to a subsequent tweet that came out from Rim Mumtaz. She said, "Trevor Books, also known as Abu Izzadeen, solicitor, confirms to me that he is still in jail and could not have possibly been the attacker today at Westminster." And then, of course, the New York Post subsequently came back and issued a correction on your screen. "A radical Muslim cleric was erroneously named as the London attacker in local reports." So as per usual, there's quick politicization and a quick pointing of the finger in order to try to make sure that it's the other person's side, if there is such a thing in this type of tragedy, that's responsible for this tragedy. What's interesting is that there has not yet been anyone identified. And again, if you're watching this live on Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that is the case. If you're watching this anytime other than that, we may very well know who the perpetrator, the terrorist is. What I do know is we have a very quick propensity to identify the person, the individual, if it is someone of Arab descent, with a Muslim sounding name, or if they are actually Muslim. We do have the propensity, or the tendency is actually the word I'm looking for. We have the tendency in Western civilization, in the West, to actually identify them very quickly if it conforms to this notion of terrorism that we have. So I'll be very interested in seeing who the perpetrator actually is, regardless of who they are. 40 people have been injured, 5 people have been killed, including the terrorist himself. All right. So we'll keep you updated on that. Here's some other news that's very interesting coming out of the Russia issue. Representative Nunes, who actually is the chairman of the Oversight Committee, I don't know which way to start with this. Actually, let's start with the video of his conversation. Well, actually, let me preface it. He found out some information, and he found out that President Trump and possibly President Trump and some of his campaign officials were incidentally or indirectly captured in surveillance. Instead of including this inside of the broader investigation of the Oversight Committee, he runs to the White House and he informs the White House of what he found. If that doesn't instantly ring a bell as to why that's problematic, consider this: the Congressional Oversight Committee is supposed to be completely independent and separate from the executive branch. That's why it's a part of Congress. It is not Nunes's job to give the president updates about an ongoing investigation. Subsequently, because he has done this, senators, politicians of all stripes, John McCain, the Republican senator, has stated that it is time for independent investigation, an independent committee to investigate this, because Nunes has all but invalidated his ability to carry out this investigation by carrying the water, basically carrying the water for the White House, taking it to Donald Trump and letting Donald Trump know what he has discovered before he even let his committee know what he discovered. So let's play the clip of what he said and what he found out.
So first, I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value, were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting. Third, I have confirmed that additional names of Trump transition team members were unmasked. And fourth and finally, I want to be clear, none of this surveillance was related to Russia or the investigation of Russian activities or of the Trump team.
So here's the problem with this. Number one, he went to the White House with this. And this is not the culmination. This is not his findings. This is not the results of the committee, and he's reporting the findings, and he decided to go to the White House to let them know in advance, this is what we found, and this is what we're getting ready to go to the public with. No, this is him in the middle of, at the beginning stages of the investigation, letting President Trump know exactly what he found before he even let his committee know what he found. That's problem number one. Number two, it's that he's asserting it in a fashion that shows you that he is incapable of carrying out an unbiased investigation. He's directly inserting partisanship into something that should be an unpartisan or at least a bipartisan effort to find the truth. Right. So there's no question about it that he's doing this at the bidding of the White House. How can he investigate the White House when he is a servant of the White House, carrying this water like a lapdog to President Trump? He can't do it. And so this is problematic on so many different levels. But what happened subsequently is Donald Trump used this as an opportunity to vindicate himself, allegedly, or quote unquote, vindicate himself, and to absolve himself, as to say that, well, one, the Obama administration was wiretapping me. If you break down what Nunes actually said, Nunes is actually saying that this is an indirect surveillance. In other words, Donald Trump and someone in his administration or other people in his administration contacted or were in communication with people who were already under surveillance. So it's not that the Trump and the Obama administration went to spy on or quote unquote tap Donald Trump's lines. Like, I don't know who even talks like that still, to tap your phone lines. It's not that the Obama administration tapped his phone lines. It's that Donald Trump and his team were in communication with somebody who was already under investigation, who was already under surveillance. So Donald Trump is using this as a means of vindicating himself with regards to the tweet and to absolve himself with regards to the investigation. But it does neither. It's neither one of those things are true, right? His tweet about President Trump, about President Obama investigating him is still a lie. It's still unfactual, and the investigation is still going on. The only thing that has changed, or that should change, should be the fact that now the Oversight Committee, underneath the direction of Nunes, is completely incapable of carrying this out in at a minimum, a bipartisan fashion, let alone an unbiased, nonpartisan perspective. So here is Representative Adam Schiff's response. He's the top Democrat on the intelligence panel. He's a part of this investigation. Here's his response to what Nunes did today.
The chairman will need to decide whether he is the chairman of an independent investigation into conduct which includes allegations of potential coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians, or he is going to act as a surrogate of the White House because he cannot do both.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, I think the actions of today throw great doubt into the ability of both the chairman and the committee to conduct the investigation the way it ought to be conducted. I have expressed these grave concerns with the chairman. I only learned about this the way that all of you did when the chairman briefed the press in advance of briefing his own committee members. And that is a deep, deep problem. I think it does underscore the importance of establishing an independent commission, a body that is fully independent of any political considerations, including those that may.
So it doesn't get. That should be it, right? Nunes on yesterday, just to add fuel to this fire of getting this investigation out from underneath Nunes, on yesterday, he let us know that he didn't know who Paul Manafort was. He didn't know who Carter Page was the two individuals who worked with Donald Trump. Manafort was the chairman of the campaign. Both of them are under investigation. Manafort had to step down because of his relationships with Russia. And here, the chairman of the investigation of the investigative arm of the Oversight Committee does not know who these two individuals are. So not only is he irresponsible and doing the bidding of Donald Trump, running like a lapdog to his leader, dear leader, but he's also incompetent if he doesn't know, or at a minimum, he's a liar. If he knows who those two individuals are, and he said that he didn't, then of course he's a liar. But more likely, he's just incompetent, completely feckless. And we should be at the point in this whole Russia issue where the investigation should be able to go on without it being daily news, and then let's find out the results of the investigation. But when you have somebody like this in charge of the investigation, you cannot have an effective investigation in the first place. And it can't help but to be daily news because of how imbecilic Nunes is. So much so, John McCain, like I mentioned earlier, I want to read his direct quote. He was on Greta Van Susteren's show on MSNBC. Why the hell she's on MSNBC? Your guess is as good as mine, but that's not the point. He says that he said that he now believes that Congress does not have the credibility to conduct an independent investigation into what connections, if any, President Trump campaign had with the Russian officials during the election. And he said, quote, "I'm calling for a select committee because I think this back and forth shows that Congress no longer has that credibility to handle this alone." And I don't say that lightly. And I don't use a quote from John McCain lightly, because John McCain is as hawkish as they come. He is not someone that we hold up in great esteem. However, he does carry the pressure that's necessary to come from the Republican Party to actually get an independent investigation. My wish is that they would get this investigation started, get it finished, give us the results so that we can move on to all the other things that Donald Trump is doing that is directly damaging the United States. You could join the conversation, 857-600-0518. Let me know what you think about any of these stories. Let me know what's your take. I have my take. You have yours. I want to know yours. Leave a comment. We have our comment section up there on the screen behind us, YouTube comment section. So perfect time for you guys to troll. But I know we have a pretty good audience in YouTube. But leave us a comment. We'll mention your comment on air, or you can call in. Let's shift gears and talk about healthcare. The Trumpcare, Ryan care, whatever you want to call it. Tomorrow is the big day. Tomorrow they take a vote on Trumpcare. They take a vote on Ryan care, and they're really risking the possibility of it not even passing the House. I'm not really sure if I want to put stock in that. It's likely that you never know. It could pass, even though there are about 20 Republican congressmen, congresspeople who have said that they're not going to support this bill. Donald Trump showed up at the Hill on yesterday and all but threatened. Well, actually, he politically threatened the entire caucus, saying whoever doesn't support this bill, he's going to come after them. Whoever doesn't support this bill, they're going to lose in their midterm elections. So Donald Trump is putting the full weight of the White House behind this piece of legislation that is laughable. This piece of legislation that they took 8 years to craft, or 7 years of President Obama's term to craft a replacement that is a laughable replacement. In many regards, there's very little substance there, but the substance that is there is very harmful to the average American and very beneficial to the top 1%, the wealthiest in America. But that's not the point. The point is, tomorrow they're going to take a vote on this, and with about 22 GOP votes, about 20 rather, that say that they cannot really support this. They have one Democrat who is expected to be absent on Thursday. But the leading voices against this are actually coming from the Freedom Caucus. So there's a Freedom Caucus spokeswoman said on Wednesday that more than 25 members of its group will oppose the bill. The Republican Party can only really afford 22. If you look at the numbers, they can only afford 22 people Congress people to not vote for this. The caucus, the Freedom Caucus, which is this extreme, rabidly right, unreasonable, irrational, I mean, just the furthest right that you can imagine. They're the ones who are actually going to be responsible for keeping Obamacare in place if they're successful. They want to get rid of Obamacare, but the reason they don't want to support this bill is because it doesn't go far enough. It's not draconian enough for them. The Freedom Caucus does not want the government to be involved in healthcare, especially in any form that resembles government healthcare or socialized healthcare, right? So for them, it's not enough to replace this, for this bill to simply be a replacement. They want a full repeal of Obamacare and let the cards fall wherever they may. So it's interesting that the people who are going to be, if this fails tomorrow, the people who will be responsible for it are the people who probably hate Obamacare more than Paul Ryan. But that's the way That's the way hatred works, and that's the way politics works, right? Their message, what they want, the Freedom Caucus, what they want is to completely start over. They don't want to patch up. They don't want to build on. They don't want to take apart and keep some components. They want to completely start over. And so it's very likely that this will not pass on tomorrow. Now, here's the flip side. If it does pass, it's very likely that it will not pass the Senate. It is dead on arrival, according to Rand Paul of Kentucky. So it could be like cap and trade. It could be that it makes it out of the House, right, and doesn't make it out of the Senate. Either way it goes, it's fascinating to me that they would put this much political capital. President Trump, I don't think he's smart enough to know, but he's like, he's just so confident in his abilities that he's going to put all of his political capital behind this piece of crap legislation, legislation that is so weak and so poorly crafted that you could not submit it as a paper for high school. Right. And they had 8 years, 7 years. I keep saying 8, but it's 7 years that they had to actually build a replacement. And this is the best that they can come up with. And Donald Trump really doesn't know better than to try to be a bulldog and force his way onto all of his caucus members. In reality, this could backfire on him very spectacularly. And we'll get to see this on tomorrow. Some last minute tweaks were added. And the tweaks that the Republican Party added actually have added some further complications. Veterans groups discovered that the latest draft might make them ineligible for tax credits. And then a change made to ensure the measure would comply with Senate rules ensures that individuals can only qualify for the bill's tax credits if they are not eligible for other types of coverage, including those provided Veterans Health by the Veterans Health Administration. So this is another layer of complication that's going to fuel opposition to it. But the leading opposition to it is coming from the House Freedom Caucus, and their entire contention is this is not enough. We don't care how many people don't have insurance. We just want a full repeal of Obamacare and start over with something that they approve of. Ironically, the greatest irony in this entire conversation is that this legislation is as conservative as it gets. This legislation comes from a model built by the Heritage Foundation. This legislation comes from what was tested here in Massachusetts, known as Romneycare. And this is really 100% about hatred of President Obama. Not even about the merits of success or failure of this. They've done everything they could to undermine it. They stopped the Medicaid expansion in some key states, and now they're declaring that it's a failure because the prices have gone up. They've done everything they could to undermine this, but they cannot find a replacement. And the reason they can't find a replacement is because within their ideological framework, there's nowhere else they can go to actually have something resembling universal coverage. They're not going to go to the left and get single payer. But they can't go any further to the right because this legislation, Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is already a conservative framework. Let's take this caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, this is Brianna.
Hey, Brianna, how's it going?
I'm pretty good. From what I understand from the Freedom Caucus, that they basically just want to repeal the whole thing. They don't even want a replacement plan.
Mm-hmm.
They just leave it as, go back to what we had before Obamacare was in place, which was pretty bad in of itself. And ironically enough, they might just end up saving Obamacare for now.
I know.
And from what I understand, what Trump said was a couple of weeks ago, that if this GOP replacement plan does not pass, then he's just going to leave Obamacare as it is and just blame it on the Democrats as it quote unquote failed. And I'm like, okay, we'll take that because I'd rather have Obamacare for the next 4 years. It's better than what they have, and
right.
I want a single payer, but I just don't want them to get rid of Obamacare because a lot of people I know is on Obamacare. So
Yeah. I mean,
And,
I mean, honestly, and that's not necessarily like the super popular take on the left, right? People on the left, we do want single payer. We do want something like Medicare for all. We want something. We want socialized healthcare, just like every other major developed country has. But if we're stuck between no care and Obamacare, then the only reasonable, rational answer is let's keep what we have until we can get something better. Let's not burn it down and hurt the millions of people that are going to be hurt simply because we don't have exactly what we're looking for. So thanks, Brianna, for the call. I really appreciate it. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. Let's shift gears to... This is a crate. I don't even know how to start this. Sometimes people say that we're being hyperbolic when we say stuff like black people are being hunted down and killed. This is a story that's breaking today. A man drove up from Maryland, a white man from Maryland, drove up to New York in order to kill black men and to make a statement. He turned himself into the police today, 24 hours after he encountered and successfully killed a black man. This gentleman's whose name is on the screen. The gentleman who is on the screen is James Harris Jackson. He's 28 years old, drove up from Maryland to New York City specifically to kill black men. Authorities say that this guy is, quote, someone who had long harbored feelings of hatred towards black men before violently acting on them this week. The assistant chief of the New York Police Department, William Arbery, he said the reason why he picked New York is because it's the media's capital of the world, and he wanted to make a statement. Based on statements that he made, as well as preliminary review of the video, it reveals that the attack on 66-year-old Timothy Kaufman was clearly racially motivated. The suspect, Jackson, was specifically intending to target male blacks for assault. Now, this is clearly New York police officer language when they describe people as male blacks, black males. It will talk anyway. There's another video on that. You can see how disturbing that language is in and of itself. But the point is, Jackson, the officer went on to say, quote, has been harboring these types of feelings for quite some time. It's well over 10 years that he's been harboring these feelings of hate towards black men. He said male blacks. I just can't keep repeating that shit like that. It's ridiculous. He kills a 66-year-old man. He stabs him in the back with a 26-inch black mini sword. This guy, James Harris, did 3 years in the Army. He's a military veteran. He was deployed to Afghanistan between 2010 and December of 2010 and November of 2011. He encountered Timothy Kaufman, 66-year-old man, after 11 p.m. on Monday and stabbed him multiple times. Kaufman went to a police precinct to get help. They took him to the hospital, Bellevue Hospital, where he died. There's a lot to say about this story. Don't think for a second that this type of hatred has long been in America. But don't think that your president's language does not motivate people to go further with this type of hatred. We saw this with the Indian immigrant who was killed at a bar because they thought he was Arab, and they said, "Get out of my country," and shot the man. This is a moment in American history where this type of hatred is tacitly celebrated. And when I say tacitly celebrated, perhaps that's hyperbolic, but this isn't. Your president, who is quick to condemn everything that any Muslim or any immigrant has ever done, he's going to get on Twitter and tweet about this all day long about an immigrant who steals a piece of cheese, right? He'll tweet about that. But he's not going to say one thing about this coward who stabbed a 66-year-old man in the back. He's not going to say anything about the white terrorism that exists in the United States. You know why? Because if he says anything, he's going to lose his support base. He's going to lose his base of supporters who they'll say this is bad. They'll say this is bad, but they won't say that it's a problem. They won't say that this is a result of racism in America. They're just going to say that this is one bad apple, right? And so if Donald Trump comes out and says anything about this, then he's going to lose his base of supporters who actually just sit back and sees this happening and doesn't think anything significant is going on in their country. When in reality, this type of hatred does not fuel itself. It doesn't start by itself. It started because this is a type of hatred of blackness and brownness and other, just anyone who's not white. This is what has existed in America for a very long time. And your president is not going to say anything about it. That's number 2, 3. I don't know what number I'm on. The other thing I want to say about this coward is that he attacked an old man, 66-year-old, and stabbed him from behind. You want to kill black men? Go to Bed-Stuy. Go to Brooklyn. Go some parts of Harlem, but Harlem has been regentrified. So, so much gentrification in Harlem, you might not find black people in Harlem. But I want you to run up on a black man face to face and see how you fare. Run up against somebody, what are you, 28 years old? 28 years old, and see how you fare. This is this is not only hatred, but this is cowardice of magnitudes that I have not seen in a long time. What kind of human being, not let alone a man, but a human being has to kill somebody from behind when you're out to make a statement? It's not like this is not like a hit. This is not somebody that you just got to do a job. You got to hit him from behind and keep moving. No, he wanted to make a statement and he was too cowardly to kill someone or to attack someone roughly his age group. He went after the most vulnerable person and went after them from behind. I wonder what jail he's sitting in right now. This may not end well for him. Let's take this caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
What's going on, Ben?
What's going on, my dude? How's it going?
Oh, man. The sad part about this situation is that, man, see, my thing is in terms of the language that Donald Trump used on the campaign trail. I mean, you're an African American, I'm an African American, and we say something, they always say we pulling the race card.
Yep.
Well, people who really should have came out and said something against a lot of this rhetoric that was white people should have came out.
Yeah.
And I know you got white listeners, and you got people who watching you. They might think I'm bringing up race, but the only people who can stop this is white people. The ones who don't agree with this kind of act, they're the only ones who can stop it, because if they don't stop it, it's just going to grow more. Because if me and you say something, they just pulling the race card.
Yeah. Now,
my thing is, in terms of what's going on, is no different than when you think about civil rights movement after all of the different passes by Lyndon B. Johnson. When you look at what happened after Reconstruction, is no different when anytime people of color or minority got any kind of head in this community, in this society in America, you always have some backlash.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why you're seeing a lot of this is because people were upset about President Obama.
Yeah,
now, me
sure.
personally, I didn't agree with all his policies, but I didn't take it personal. But you got a lot of people taking it personal. Think about the gentleman you talked about last week. I think it's the senator, Steve King.
Yeah.
Think about what he said. That
type of language, man. Yeah.
We can say something about it. Ben. But if his own people don't check him, then this stuff is going to get perpetuated more and more. And like you said, he was a coward because he picked a 66-year-old man. But it's no different than what happened in South Carolina when the guy went into the
Come on, man.
the parishioners.
You're right.
They're never going to go into the hood. Think about what Dylan Roof said. I would have went into the neighborhood, but I was scared they were going to shoot back. So, you know, all we can do at this point in time is to show these people for who they are. But only way it's going to stop being is that other white people got to call them out, plain and simple.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with what you just said, Al. This is Al, right? Detroit?
Yeah, it's Al. Yeah, I
for sure.
a lot. That's the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's anything wrong with what you said whatsoever. Thanks for the call, Al. Nothing wrong with what you said whatsoever because it's true, right? There's going to be white people who watch this clip and say, "Oh, you're a racist," or "You're reverse racist." First of all, I don't give a shit. I don't care. You know, I eat that shit for breakfast, morning, noon, and night. That's like, you know, that's milk for me, right? I'm the real racist. Fine. But it's never going to get through to them. And there's a group of people that this will never get through to anyway, no matter who tells them. All right. And I'm going to use Hillary Clinton's language. They are the deplorables. They are the dregs of society. They need to be so ashamed to show their face that they don't even come out of their house except to go to work and hide their face in shame. Right. Because they are beyond reaching. You can't reach them. And I think sometimes as progressives, we don't ever like to feel that we can't convince somebody or that we should abandon trying to convince some people. But listen, I personally don't have time to reach people or try to reach people who are going to get pleasure out of your misery. Right? That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who are only in this conversation for the games, for the laughs, for the giggles, right? And they find this funny. The people who will share images of Trayvon Martin dead on the ground, and they think that's funny. There are deplorables who are not reachable, and it's hilarious that this is a strange intersection between progressives on the left, many of whom are atheists, but they share this in common with like Christians, right? Christians don't ever want to admit that some people are just not. You can't save everybody. But for those who could be saved, and in this conversation about race, some of them can only be reached by other white people. And that's the bottom line. I could say it until I'm blue in the face. If I could become white in the face, maybe they'll hear me, but they're never going to hear me as long as they see my skin color, because for them, it's an uncomfortable conversation in many ways. And this is not all white people, right? But it's just true. It's just true. You have to hear from someone that you feel is not coming from a biased perspective. And there's some people who are going to listen to every word I say, and no matter how logically I lay it out, no matter how reasonably I lay it out, no matter how unpassionately or just calm and measured I'll say it, they won't be able to hear it from me. They have to hear it from somebody else. And I'm totally cool with that. Hear it from somebody, but get this shit together, because Al, the caller, is exactly correct. Like coward is not enough, right? Coward doesn't describe what it takes for you to go and try to be a white race warrior, and instead of going into real combat, you go and kill elderly people. Of the people who were killed in South Carolina, I would say, I believe 7 of the 9 were over 60. 6 of the 9 were over 60, somewhere in their 80s. Anyway, I mean, if you want to call in and talk about that, that's fine. But one last thing, and as Al, the last caller, was speaking, Donald Trump tweeted. He said that he spoke to UK Prime Minister Theresa May today and offered condolences on terrorist attack in London. She is strong and doing very well. So he's quick to jump on this quote unquote terrorist attack. He's not going to say anything about the terrorist attack at the Muslim mosque in Toronto. 6 Muslims killed by a white person who supports him. He's not going to say anything about the people who, in his name and in his honor, have gone out and killed Americans or immigrants working legally in America. I don't care if they're working illegally, but they were here legally and they killed them, telling them to go back home. He's not going to say anything. He's not going to spend one damn character out of 140 on the lives of brown people and black people killed by white supremacists in America. But he'll drop everything he's doing and tweet all day about a situation that could be connected to terrorists. Because when we say terrorists, it's got to mean brown people. It's got to mean Muslims. This is your president of the United States. Let's take this next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hi, Ben. This is Jamie, editor of Progressive Army.
Hey, Jamie, what's going on? Progressive Army?
Hi. Yep. We just published an article by Brandon about the death of Kaufman and the basically the media response to it, which was it's a very interesting article about how they basically they were talking about like this guy's criminal history and his medical history, and it's a really fascinating article about how the media looks at the deaths of black and brown people and normalizes white supremacy.
I'm pulling it up now. So it's
we just now published it.
Oh yeah, you published it within the last hour. It's entitled "Daily News and Post." Daily Post demonstrate how not to cover the murder of a black person. It's by Brandon. Everyone who watches my show on a regular basis, you should know who Brandon Sutton is. I'm going to send the image over there to you, Max. But it is Brandon. Actually, do me a favor. Somebody get Brandon on the phone. Tell Brandon to call in so he can discuss it a little bit more in detail. The premise of it is definitely true, right? The way they humanize white murderers. And if you steal a piece of bread, then they're going to dehumanize you if you're black. That is something that we see on an ongoing basis. So Brandon, if you're available, we could talk about that. Call in, you know the number, man, or you can Skype in directly. And as soon as we get you on the line, we'll discuss it. And there you go, Max is in the Dropbox. All right. While we wait on that, let's shift gears and talk about one or two other things while we have some time. We're making good time tonight. And thanks for the heads up on Jamie over there on Progressive Army. I want to talk about Neil Gorsuch. I want to talk about him and his case. So Neil Gorsuch has finished up day 2, I believe. Day 2. Yesterday was day 1. 11 hours of testimonies and his confirmation hearings. And I want to play an exchange. The best way for me to start this conversation is to play an exchange between he and Feinstein, Senator Feinstein, with regard to his position on a particular decision by the Supreme Court. And I will unpack why it's important as soon as we finish listening to the clip. Let's play the clip.
Asking you, do you agree with his statement? Yes or no?
Are the statements out of the Heller decision from the United States?
Justice Scalia's statement.
Well, whatever's in Heller is the law, and I follow the law.
With.
Well, it's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing,
right there,
Senator, respectfully. It's a matter of it being the law. And my job is to apply and enforce the law.
All right, fair enough. All
right. I've got a lot of problems with this clip. Some of my problems with this clip are really with Feinstein, Senator Feinstein, because she was asking him about a case, Heller. This is a Supreme Court decision that really hinges on, or really deals with, rather, Supreme Court decision and the right to bear arms. And what she's trying to do in this exchange is trying to see if he's going to take the side of an unpopular decision, at least unpopular from a progressive left-leaning perspective. The problem I have with, and I believe it was Feinstein, my memory is skipping me, but the problem I have with it is that she picked a case that doesn't demonstrate what she wants to demonstrate, right? Because this is not a controversial case from from a conservative perspective, right? This is a polarizing case. This is going to make Heller, the decision with Heller has to deal with the Second Amendment, whether or not the Second Amendment protects an individual right to keep and bear arms for self-defense. This is not going to be controversial. This is going to, no matter where Gorsuch falls on this, it's not controversial. It's polarizing. You're going to have people who love him. You're going to have people who hate him. But what's most important about this exchange is what Gorsuch is communicating. He's communicating this. He says it doesn't matter what he believes about the law. His job is to interpret or defend or make decisions based on the existing law. And this goes right in line with his originalist and strict constitutionalist perspective, right? That is, the Constitution is not a living, breathing document. Side note, to interpret the Second Amendment in a way that actually means that individuals can carry weapons is actually not an originalist interpretation, but I digress. We could probably have people argue about that for days, but it is in itself an example of taking liberties with a living, breathing document. But the point is this. The point is that Gorsuch and conservatives like him love to sit on their ivory tower and say, this is just the law. And I don't really have an opinion on it. I'm going to just interpret it based on what the strict letter of the law says. Here's the problem with that. And here's my problem. A second problem that I have with Feinstein, with her line of questioning. American law has not always been just. And the Constitution itself was not designed for really anyone except for white men. If you take the Constitution as it was written at the time that it was written, and you are really trying to be an originalist, then there are so many problems that would still exist today, if not for a Supreme Court who is willing to look back over the Constitution and interpret it for the times in which we live. That's number one. But the number two, there are Supreme Court decisions that have absolutely carried the weight of law, that have been anything but just. And what bothers me about Feinstein is that she uses an example of a case to try to demonstrate this that is probably the worst case that you could pick, right? Nobody's going to be, shocked if he even fell on the side of the decision and say, yes, I support the right to bear arms as determined by Columbia versus Heller. Shocking. District of Columbia versus Heller. Shocking. No one's going to be shocked by that. But even in the line of questioning, his defense to his answer to her question is that I'm simply going to interpret it the way that it was written. I'm not here to determine whether law is bad or whether a law is good, or whether a Supreme Court case decision was bad or whether a Supreme Court case decision was good. And Feinstein says, okay, I'll give you that. No, don't give him that. Ask him about the Dred Scott decision. Ask him about Plessy versus Ferguson, Dred Scott decision, and Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson. No, Dred Scott. See, I'm not a legal scholar, but I pretend like I'm one. No, Dred Scott actually codified into law the dehumanization of slaves, that we were not citizens, that the Constitution was not meant for us. And this was a decision that stood for years. And people could hide behind the fact that this was a Supreme Court decision, therefore the law of the land. Plessy versus Ferguson, codified separate but equal into our law. And so anyone who says, like Gorsuch and like Scalia did, anyone who says that, oh, well, we're just going to interpret it as it is. It's not our job. It's not even interpret it. That's the wrong word. It's not our job to interpret it. It's our job to carry it out as strictly written. And if you want to expose the fallacious nature of that argument, you don't do it, Feinstein, with District of Columbia versus Heller, depending a case basically that hinges on the Second Amendment, because that's simply polarizing. People are just going to get on their sides of that argument. You do it with a case that clearly demonstrates that America, from its inception, has had unjust laws that required the Supreme Court to overturn and to interpret differently than it was written. Now, that's my problem with Feinstein, but whatever. And No, I'm not an attorney. No, but this. I'm not a senator. No, but this is pretty simple. This is pretty simple. Anyone who makes that argument, make them defend the laws that America has passed throughout its history that have been anything but just. Here's my problem with Gorsuch. He gets to present himself as this dignified, honorable man who's going to be just. In reality, he is nothing more than a person who wants to freeze America at a time that only benefited white men. I would argue white Christian men, but we'll be more specific, white men, or less specific and say white men. The reason I make that argument is because if you freeze America and you take this interpretation of the Constitution and you take previous laws or cases decided by the Supreme Court and you freeze them at the time in which they were decided and at the time in which it was written, then how else can you, how does anyone else get liberty in America except for the people the Constitution was written for? You cannot say that the Constitution was written for every person. You cannot say that we, the people, actually included slaves, actually included women. It actually included men who had property. You cannot say that it included the LGBTQ community. You cannot say that it included anyone else except the people who were represented at the time of its writing. So how? Here's the question, Senator Feinstein. How can you justify being a strict constitutionalist or an originalist when the original Constitution, as written, did not protect or enfranchise anyone but white men? I would love to know the answer. Maybe he has it rationalized out. Maybe he can actually justify being an originalist while still protecting all Americans. I would love to see it, but we won't see it because Dianne Feinstein, one, she gave up on the line of questioning, and two, the case that she used to even set this argument up was the wrong case to set this argument up. But again, that I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a senator. I'm just a guy with a radio show and a YouTube channel. Let's take this caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and/or question?
Hi, Ben. It's me, Brandon. What you doing?
Brandon, bruh, never call me. Never call me like that again. I didn't know if you were Hannibal Lecter. I didn't know who, you really, hello, Clarice. That's what you sounded like. What's going on, man? Let's talk about your article. We're going to pull that image up on the screen, and I want you to tell me about how the Daily News and the New York Post got this wrong.
Okay, well, tell me when to start. You ready now?
Yeah, you got it. It's on you. When I'm quiet, that usually means you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right.
So,
actually, hang on. We're going to be super phony here. We're going to start a new clip because this is a very serious story. This is all right. So we're going to start a new clip, and you let me know, Max, when we're ready. All right. So I have Brandon Sutton on the line, and he wrote an article for theprogressivearmy.com about the white man who drove up from Maryland to New York to kill a black man, and he ended up killing a 66-year-old black man, stabbed him from behind, and the individual died. The man died. Brandon, thanks for calling in. You are covering this from the media perspective, how they are covering this story. Tell me more about the article you wrote.
Well, yeah, just for a quick breakdown, like you said, James Harris Jackson drove up from Baltimore on Monday. Or actually, he came up on a bus on St. Patrick's Day from Baltimore, New York, with the express purposes of killing a black man, as the police have found out. And on Monday, he killed 66-year-old Timothy Kaufman. I want to say you have pronounced his name?
Yeah, Kaufman.
And an altercation in Manhattan and Hell's Kitchen. And so, I mean, it's like I said, my article says it's a relatively simple story. And after turning himself into the police, Jackson explained that he was, he hated black men specifically who dated white women. He had felt that way for the past 10 years, and he had come to New York because New York was a media capital, and that he wanted to maximize the exposure and impact of him killing a black man to make a bigger statement. So, simple story, white supremacist, tragic, obviously, white supremacist kills black man in a terrorist attack. They literally, he was trying to instill terror and
Right.
to accomplish his social-political aims. That's
Definition
terror
of
attack.
terrorism. Yeah.
The problem becomes with the way that the Daily News and the Post covered the death of
Mr. Kaufman. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Kaufman. Insofar they felt the need to include extraneous elements to the story and information that really had no bearing on the case, specifically the criminal history and medical history of Kaufman, and so far that he had been arrested 11 times for various crimes, and that he may or may not have had HIV/AIDS. That basically, the same trend we see when any time a black man is killed in the news, just need to bring up his criminal history, the fact that it has no bearing on the case.
Wow. Okay. So I actually, because you just published this within the hour while we were on air, basically, and I did not know this, but they delved over into Mr. Kaufman's run-ins with the law and his health status. Like, they questioned whether or not he had HIV or AIDS, completely irrelevant to the tragedy at hand, completely irrelevant to the terrorist attack, the terroristic nature of this attack. Instead, they dehumanized the victim. For what effing purpose does that serve?
Well, I don't know what the purpose is. I can't speak to the intent of the writers, but what I can say is that what it does is it minimizes his death, right? By portraying him as a criminal or as having this disease, they are trying to minimize his death. In the former case, by sort of creating this narrative that, well, a criminal who dies, that's sort of a lesser death, right? Because a criminal, once someone commits a crime, they're always a criminal, and criminals always commit crimes. So it implies that Kaufman was going to commit crimes in the future. The Post article goes so far as to calling him a career criminal, like to imply that he was a career criminal, and then they explain that in his dying moments that he was still resisting the cops and all other stuff. They don't even kind of imply that, hey, maybe he's in shock from being stabbed by a samurai sword, by a 26-inch sword, which is what Jackson was wielding when he killed him with. This might be one of, and maybe I shouldn't say this because the media never fails to surprise me, but this might be one of the most egregious iterations of this tactic, right? This is the man who is the victim. We see this standard play with like Michael Brown, right? Who is the victim, who's dead. His run-in was with a police officer. So the standard play is, let's find out everything bad about this kid so that we can help this police officer. Here is a man who expressly said that he's going up to kill black people because he wants to make a statement, and he hates black men in particular. And the media still uses the standard operating procedure of vilifying and dehumanizing the black person. And you see in your headline, your subhead title says, what does this have to do with anything? And I have to ask that question again. What the hell does this have to do with anything with regard to this murder? I wrote an article about Mike Brown last week about, why this happens, what the effect is. And, we can't say what's in the mind of the writers. I've looked at the Daily News. They retracted some of the information and replaced, his criminal history and his medical history with, his hobbies and his interests, and like the fact that he liked music, and that he was like things that would humanize him, information that would emphasize the fact that this murder was not based in any kind of, it was in no way based on the activities of Kaufman, because that's what this does, right? When you emphasize the past crimes of a person, it implies causality. It implies the fact that, hey, he might have been killed because he was a criminal. Who knows? I think that you're right. What makes it so egregious is that normally we see this in cases where the person is killed by the police, right? But this is, as clear-cut a case of white supremacist hate crime as you can get, and
they still use the same
article
play.
becomes further. Yeah, become egregious because they don't even refer to a man as a white supremacist. They don't even refer to Jackson as a white supremacist. They don't even refer to it really as a terrorist attack. They don't refer to it as any of these things. They just say that, his hatred of black people is sort of really vague refusal to label it what it actually is. And not only that, but the Daily News article goes even further to sort of draw this false equivalency between this murder and the murder that occurred the murder of two police officers that occurred in 2014 in December.
Two officers.
That's how the Daily News ends. Yeah, that's how the Daily News chooses to end their intends to use in their article on the murder of a black man, is to end the article with the crime committed by a completely unrelated black person against the police, and they decide to go full all lives matter for some reason.
Wow,
it is just egregious and confusing, and just it shows you the disdain for black life that exists in the media, and it really becomes like, well, what else can you call it?
Wow. I'm looking through your article now to try to find where you mentioned that about the killing of those two police officers back in about 2, maybe 3 years ago in Bed-Stuy. But Brandon, December. I remember we were actually getting ready, and it's completely irrelevant. That's the whole thing. It's like 100% irrelevant to the conversation. But I remember it clear as day. And what they did is what they use it for is exactly what I just went through. Right? What I just went through in my mind is the emotional attachment that I had to that incident because of my proximity to it, one. And then two, I was getting ready to take my family to New York for Christmas just to see the lights in Rockefeller Center. And then this happens a few days before Christmas. And so clearly we canceled our train tickets so that we wouldn't be down there in the middle of that. And what this does is when they pull this stuff up, it emotionalizes, if I can make that word up, it draws on the emotions. But it doesn't draw on the emotion to humanize this black victim. It draws on the emotion to make you fear the person who was brutally murdered by a coward white supremacist. This is. Go ahead.
So you know me, Ben. I'm not a journalist, but
you just play one on TV.
To journalists.
Yeah.
I just play one on the internet, and at bars to pick a living. But here's what I will say. It's like you said, like if you put information in an article, by the nature of doing that, you make it relevant. You're making an argument that this information is in some way relevant to what the article is based on. Like what the precipitating event for that article is. So if you put his criminal history in, if you put the murder of two black police officers, you are making that information relevant to your argument, or rather to the events that occurred. And so it creates this situation where they are making these events relative. They're implying causality with his criminal history. They're implying this sort of weird. It's not weird at all, because they're implying basically that black people can be held for the actions of other black people. They're minimizing his death, by saying that the real tragedy is when black people kill cops. Am I right, guys? And it's like, but that's completely
so absurd.
Irrelevant. And just take a step further, we see this again and again, like this refusal to refer to white supremacists as white supremacists, this refusal to refer to them as terrorists, but even more cogently, this refusal to attach their hate crimes to the larger ideology of white supremacy.
Right,
like
but their quickness
to say, okay,
but their quickness to let me add this, and then we have to wrap it up. But they're very quick to tie in any black crime with all black people, and by referencing the incident in Bed-Stuy back in 2014, I believe 2013. Forgive me if I got the year wrong, but
they attach to Black Lives Matter.
Exactly, because that's exactly what they connected that to. That's exactly what they connected the New York murders to. I don't mean to cut you off, Brandon. I mean to cut you off, but we are already over time. Everyone, go check out this piece on progressivearmy.com. As if the story wasn't tragic enough, now you have this compounding of insult to injury with the media vilifying and dehumanizing the victim. This is beyond victim blaming. This is destroying a man who has just been murdered by a cowardly white supremacist. Brandon, thanks for the call. And we'll be in touch and have you back on as soon as possible. Folks, we're all out of time. It's been a pleasure. Special thanks to my producers, David Grossman, Max I don't know if you want me to say your whole name on air. And all of you who make the Progressive Army and the Benjamin Dixon Show possible. I will see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.